Hey guys, so as you can see, I'm currently at the airport waiting for my international flight to the States. This trip to the States has turned into kind of a total nightmare, which I will explain more later when I'm not out in public and have more time. Yeah, it started with a 6-hour delay and it just ballooned from there into a series of unfortunate events basically. But to make the most out of this unfortunate situation, I decided to kind of turn it into a fun challenge of sorts by trying to study as much languages as possible during this extremely long trip as I possibly can. I brought a Korean book with me, and based on my calculations of previous books that I've read, it should take me around 11 hours to completely read the book, which is a long time, but my flights are definitely more than 11 hours, and so we'll see how much I can read. Possibly all of it, maybe, hopefully, I don't know, but probably not. But I also have my iPad, and so I can do Chinese, I can do some self-study reader once I buy Wi-Fi on the flight. And yeah, I'm hoping to be more productive on this flight than I typically am during these long international flights. Typically I sleep or watch movies or just play mindless games on my phone the entire time. And this time I'm trying to cut out the movies and the playing mindless games on my phone and trying to turn those minutes or hours into language learning hours. I'm not gonna cut out the sleep. I'm not gonna skip sleep just to study languages. No way at all, but yeah, so I'm gonna try and sleep as much as possible, of course, but whenever I cannot sleep, I will be trying to study as much as possible. So we'll see how much I end up getting done. And yeah, hopefully I eventually make it to my final destination. It'll probably take way longer than I had originally planned, but that's the way traveling is sometimes, and I'm just excited to eventually get this all over with. So anyway, we have around 15 minutes, I think, until boarding. Maybe 20 minutes until boarding, and so I'm gonna go ahead, start reading that book now, and yeah, I will catch up with you guys on the plane. All right, so it is now the next day, coming to you from this hotel room, as you can see, in Dallas, Texas, which is not my final destination, nor was I planning on staying the night here, but yeah, just to briefly discuss the nightmare that this trip has been. My flight was originally scheduled to leave at 5:40-ish, I believe, from Incheon Airport, but it got delayed almost 6 hours, and my layover in Dallas was 5 hours and something minutes, and so I thought that would be plenty of time for any possible delays. But yeah, 6 hours is too long of a delay for a 5-hour connection, so as you can see, I had to stay the night in a hotel. Yeah, that was definitely a huge wrench in my plans. I'm going to end up getting home about 19 hours after I was planning on arriving home, which is not ideal, but it was kind of nice to have this little pit stop and shower and, have a bit of rest in the middle of the crazy travel day. Would I ever choose to do this? No, but at least there were some pros to this negative situation. The nice thing about the delay, though, I will say, is that they let us know 15 hours in advance, so I was able to delay my trip to the airport, so I wasn't just hanging around the airport for 6 extra hours. I had those extra hours to clean and pack and spend more time at my apartment doing stuff that I needed to do. But yeah, going back to the list of disasters that I encountered on my trip, as I was going through all of the little checkpoints after security when leaving Incheon International Airport, I got through the one that has immigration or customs or some sort of checkpoint where they look at your passport. And I think that's also the place where you had to turn over your resident card if you're leaving the country for good. But anyway, I was giving my information and expected to just go through normal. She asked me when I was returning, which is typical. And I mentioned that I was gonna come back in the middle of August. And she said, "Oh, you can't." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Oh, your visa expires before then." And I thought to myself, oh crap, I didn't even think about my visa when scheduling this vacation, because I knew that my contract at my job was being extended. And so I was like, okay, good. So I was just thinking in terms of my school vacation for planning this trip and didn't even think about the fact that my visa was going to expire in the middle of August, or at the beginning of August, which is before I was planning on coming back. And so yeah, she was like, well, just make sure that you're back before this date because you have to, renew your visa and come to the immigration office and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, oh no. So yeah, I might have to cut my vacation 2 weeks short, unfortunately, which is very much not desirable because I paid a lot of money to take this trip. And so I'd like to enjoy the full extent of my trip, but if I have to go back early because of immigration, I will have to do that. I'm going to try and see if I can renew my visa online, but I'm not sure that's possible. We'll see how it turns out, but hopefully I'm able to do things online. I'm gonna call the consulate on Monday and see what I can do. But if worst comes to worst, then I will be going back to Korea early, 2 weeks early, which is definitely a bummer, but what can you do? I thought that was the end of my issues, and then I realized when I got to this hotel room after the long trip here and waiting in long lines to get vouchers that I did not bring my American chargers. So my laptop, my iPad, and my phone, I don't have any of the plugs that go into the wall for America. I only had the Korean ones. Thankfully, this hotel room had some USB chargers, so I was able to charge my phone, which was like, hallelujah. But yeah, I'm gonna have to borrow my brother's charger and then maybe buy a new one at some point. I could have sworn they were in my backpack this whole time. Like I didn't ever take them out from the last time I was in America, but apparently not. Apparently I had taken them out and stored them somewhere, and so, stupid me. Hopefully it's the only thing I left behind in Korea, but I guess we'll also see about that. But yeah, as far as the trip yesterday, it actually went surprisingly well. I ended up sleeping for about 10 hours on and off, at least like drifting in and out of consciousness kind of things. I didn't sleep very well during those hours of sleeping, but at least I was sleeping. So the time passed pretty quickly because of that. As far as like my language challenge goes, I didn't get a ton of hours done of language learning, but I will say that during the couple of hours, like 2 hours that I was not asleep, I was mostly doing language learning stuff. I also forgot, like when I was thinking that I could like finish this book, and yes, I'm using a barf bag as a bookmark, very classy. I forgot that like they turn the lights off on the plane for like almost the entire trip. It's like 11 out of the 12 and a half hours are just dark. And so I guess I could have like got my flashlight out, but it's too annoying and I was sleeping anyway. So I ended up doing a bit of do Chinese on my phone, and then I read whenever the lights were on, like during meals and stuff. So I was still very happy at the amount of time that I did get, even though it was definitely not as much as I had thought because I didn't expect to sleep that much. I'm very happy that I did again, but who knew I would actually sleep so much? It's kind of funny actually that the one time I get this much sleep is the time that I'm trying to do this challenge. But again, sleep is the most important thing to me and languages are below that, so I'm still pretty happy. But yeah, it's about time for me to head back to the airport now. So I'm gonna finish grabbing my stuff and head outside to catch my taxi.
Sissy! Sissy! Sissy!
Hey! Hey!
All right, time for the final little update for this little mini challenge vlog thing. Obviously, I made it home safe and sound to my home in the States. I took a few days off after I got home just because I was so exhausted, and I've just been relaxing and spending time with my dog, who's just barely in the frame kind of, and my brother. But yeah, thankfully the last little leg of the trip went without any further delays or mishaps, and actually there was a really weird, like serendipitous coincidence that ended up happening. So my original flight, before it got delayed and turned into a chaotic situation, when I had the 5-hour layover originally, it just so happened to coincidentally coincide with the layover that my parents were supposed to be on, because they're actually on a cruise this week in Alaska. And so we both booked our flights independently, and our layovers just miraculously overlapped in the same airport at the same time on the same day. Like, we did not plan this at all. It was just a weird coincidence. And my mom was super excited to like see me in the airport and like have a meal together, and we were planning it, and that was when I found out that my flight was delayed and we were not going to be meeting after all. And so my parents were really disappointed, and I was kind of disappointed too. But weirdly enough, even though I couldn't meet my parents in their coincidental same time Dallas airport situation, the next morning when I was going back to the airport, my grandparents who live in Dallas just happened to be leaving on a flight to go somewhere that day. And so my random coincidental overlapping time with my parents got canceled and turned into random overlapping time at the airport with my grandparents. So I ended up being able to see my grandparents at the airport and hang out with them for like 40 minutes while I waited for my flight. So what a weird coincidence that in the matter of like 24 hours, 4 members of my family just happened to be at the airport at different times, and both of which either were going to overlap or did overlap with my time at Dallas airport. What a weird situation. But anyway, after that meeting with them, I flew home, no more incidents, and I managed to get a little bit of studying done that day. Not a ton, honestly, just because there wasn't really a lot of time. I read a little bit of my book here in the hotel room that morning, but it was also the morning of the women's Wimbledon final, and so I was also kind of watching that, so I didn't read a ton that morning. And then on the flight, It was only like a 2-hour flight or a little less than that, I think. And so I did a little bit of Chinese on the flight as well, but beyond that, I didn't do any language studying that day. And so if you look at the total overall study time during this little flight travel 2-day period, on Friday, I read this book for an hour and 7 minutes. I did Japanese, Saturday Reader, the app, for 24 minutes at the airport. And on the flight, I did 50 minutes of Chinese for a total of 2 hours and 20 minutes of language study at the airport and on that first super long 12-hour something minutes flight. But again, like I said in my last little update, I slept for like 10 hours of that flight on and off. And so I'm super happy with that. Honestly, I'd much rather sleep and be well rested than have a ton of hours in this challenge. And so I'll take the paltry looking 2 hours and 20 minutes of language learning and a big old chunk of sleep any day. Then the next day, Saturday, I got way less done. Like I said, I read the book for just 19 minutes in the morning, and then I did 27 minutes of Chinese on the flight for a whopping total of 46 minutes of language learning that day. So overall, that adds up to 3 hours and 6 minutes of language learning during that chaotic, crazy trip, which is actually quite a bit less than I was expecting to get. I thought I was going to get a lot more hours than that because, like I said, typically I don't manage to sleep that much on the long flight, and so I'm usually awake for more like 6 or 7 hours of the trip at least, but I was not this time, and like I said, I'm actually very grateful for that, so I'm not complaining, but it does make my overall total look kind of sad. But it was all completely active studying, so that is still quite a bit when you think of it that way. And also, I did sleep, but when I wasn't sleeping, I was kind of feeling very out of it and like in a fog, and so it was not the best mental state to be studying in anyways. And so honestly, the fact that I was able to do this much is kind of amazing, considering basically starting with the flight after waking up and continuing the whole next day, I was not mentally very functional. I was very tired and everything was kind of hazy and doing things was just difficult. And so I'm very happy with that 3 hours and 6 minutes, even though it isn't the most spectacular, amazing of numbers. And I kind of want to try this again for the flight back, because unlike my flight here to the US, my flight back to Korea is going to be starting at 7 a.m. And so it's very much the opposite of an overnight flight. I'm probably not going to be very tired, so I'm probably not going to be able to sleep for very long. And so that flight, I'll probably be able to get some more impressive numbers if I do, stay awake. We shall see. Maybe I miraculously fall asleep for 10 hours again. I'd much rather have that, like I said, than be awake, miserable on the flight. And also the flight going back is actually like 2 hours longer than the flight coming here just because of winds in the air. So yeah, there's no way I will be sleeping for 90% of that flight. And so I think I'm gonna do a part 2 of this to see how much I can get done. And finally, the last little bit of news about the kind of disaster visa situation I found myself in. I think I'm going to have to cut my vacation in half and go back after like 2.5 weeks of being here, which is really unfortunate. My original plan was to stay for 5 weeks, and now it's turning into like 2.5-ish, maybe almost 3 weeks. I'm kind of sad, very sad about that, just because, my whole plan is kind of cut in half, literally. And so that's unfortunate, but at least, from now on, I'm going to be double and triple checking my visa times before I book a vacation, because totally was not on my radar. Yeah. So that was my travel catastrophe situation. Oh my gosh, she is so cute. But yeah, I'm just glad it's over, honestly. I'm still waking up at like 3 or 4 in the morning and falling asleep at like 8 p.m. Yeah, hopefully that jet lag will be over soon and I can be a little bit more productive during my time here, because so far I've been a sloth for sure. But yeah, that's my little language challenge. I feel like it's kind of a fail because I got 3 hours over a 2-day travel day, but again, the exhaustion, the stress, the mental fog of being exhausted on a flight trying to study. I'm honestly very happy with the 3 hours I did get, and I'm looking forward to trying it again in the future. And oh, I almost forgot to mention, I broke my Japanese study streak the second day of my travel. I was so upset at myself. Like I said, I did some book reading in the morning at the hotel before I flew the second little leg of my flight, and then I did Chinese on the plane. And then typically my schedule, like my habit that I built up is doing Saturday Reader like at night before I go to bed. But then by the time I got to the airport, my brother picked me up, brought me home, I saw my dog. I was just so tired. I didn't even think about it and just went to bed. And so I broke my streak at like day 90-ish, I think. I'll put what day exactly it was, but I was so upset. That's kind of disappointing. But since then, I've picked it back up and I've done it every day since then. But man, I was really hoping to just keep that streak all the way at least to 100 days, but I got so close and then I broke the streak, so I'm kind of disappointed about that. So I guess because of that, you can kind of maybe say this is a fail of a challenge. Oh, she's so precious. But anyway, despite that utter failure and the disappointment of having to cut my vacation in half, like I said, I'm happy that I slept so much and that I did what I did do, because 3 hours is definitely way more than I would typically study during this time. Normally I just watch movies and waste time on my phone, so I'm happy with what I got. And yeah, that's all for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Annyeong.